All right, let's go ahead and dive into this thing. Welcome to Classics 160D2, Classical Mythology, and today's very, very exciting lecture, 2.3, Hesiod's Theogony. Now, today is particularly exciting because you guys finally get to stop listening to me drone on and on and on. And today we are going to highlight our very, very wonderful TAs as they kind of walk you through the text itself, right? So far we've heard some of the stories associated with Hesiod's Theogony. Today we dive into the actual text. Moreover, we're actually going to get to the final project as well, so we're actually going to start with that today and tell you a little bit about what we expect out of you for the end of the course. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we got today. We're going to start with Dr. Rob's recap and a few announcements. Honor students, get excited for that. Then we're going to go into the final project. Katie and Julianne are going to talk a little bit about what you guys are going to produce for the end of this course and how you're going to get there, the steps along the way. Then we're going to move into the Theogony itself with Darcy talking about the Invocation to the Muse. Matthew is going to be talking about the Bane of Man, also known as Pandora. And then Colin will finish us off today with a trip to hell and back, talking, of course, about Tartarus. So, okay, recap and announcements, what we have got. Again, if you guys are still getting used to this thing, go ahead and put it in speaker mode for right now. I think when the TAs take over, they're going to be sharing their screen, so that'll kind of automatically do this sort of thing. If you have any questions along the way, send that question to one of the people who isn't talking, just because it's difficult to try to respond to questions while you're also trying to form sentences. I don't know why. It's difficult to do. Anyway, okay. Other announcements. The honors contracts are up and ready to go. So if you are in the Honors College, here is how you find out about that stuff. Go to D2L, all right? And then go to the kind of course introduction materials. And you're going to see one folder for like kind of the course info, one for like the requirements. And then there's going to be another folder right below that that says Honors Projects Fall 2020. And you're going to find everything you need there. All right. The first thing you're going to want to do is download the assignment sheet and read through that. Right. And you might very well end up being like, no, this is way too much work. So check that out first. Hang on one second. Katie, I don't know what the deal is. I keep trying to add you as a co-host outside of this, and I don't know why it's not sticking here. I'll go ahead and do this right here. Katie, can you maybe sign out and sign back in? It's not even letting me put you as a co-host on here. So it's just giving me the options to kind of stop video, that sort of thing. Try logging back in there. Okay, well, while she does that, anyway, download the assignment sheet, read through this, right? You might be like, sucks, I'm not doing it. If that's the case, that's fine. It won't hurt my feelings. But that's your decision to make. Once you've made that decision, if you want to move forward with it, go ahead and download the assignment sheet, and then you have to get onto like the honors page or something and still fill out this contract. That's just the way that it works. And then you download that, you re-upload it, and then you're going to be good to go. What I'm having you guys do is basically use Assassin's Creed Odyssey to go through a couple different kind of activity progressions. All right, so the idea is that we are going to use the kind of amazing landscape that's built in this game to investigate a few things like the sacred way and the kind of procession up to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. We'll investigate kind of Greek religious architecture on the Acropolis, kind of what you see up there. We'll end up looking at daily life in ancient Greece, just wandering around Athens. And then finally, what you're going to do is produce your own kind of activity, right? After having done a few other ones, you're going to produce your own activity at the end that kind of takes somebody else through some other aspect related to ancient Greek culture or religion or mythology, something like that. So that's what I want you guys to do. download that, read through it, decide whether you want to do it. You got about 2 weeks to submit that thing. And then I will follow up in a couple weeks to let you know what the first steps are going to be. Okay, so Katie, yeah, I don't know. It's still not giving me the option here to make you a co-host. Let me see if I can bring up Zoom and do it there. Let's see. Yeah, anyway, not having any luck there, Katie. So who is it? Julianne, you're going to have to do the heavy lifting today. Katie, we'll try to get this worked out for next time. Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is there. We might have to email the Zoom people to figure it out. But Julianne, just to give you a 5-minute heads up, you're going to be doing the heavy lifting on the final project. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to do a brief kind of recap from what we talked about last time, right? We were talking about the origins of the Greek gods and the story that tells that story, right? So Hesiod's Theogony is what we're going to get into later today. Again, one of the major takeaways here is we have to conceptualize this in a somewhat different way than we conceptualize something like sacred texts in the religions and some of the major religions today, right? So if we think of something like the Bible, many religions out there think of it as something that's either the word of God or divinely inspired at the very least. And when we think of Hesiod's Theogony for the ancient Greek world, we want to think of it as a story about the gods, but not necessarily the word of the gods themselves. Now, we started that story, right, with chaos. And then out of that chaos just starts producing different deities. The most kind of important for our purposes here is Gaia, or Mother Earth. And we talked a little bit about how these early deities have this kind of half personification quality, half nature quality. And then Gaia goes about and she starts producing more deities on her own, in particularly Uranus or Uranus, Father Sky. And then she ends up making out with her own son, which is kind of weird and gross. But hey, that's Greek mythology for you. And they make out and they have a bunch of crazy children, right? We get the Titans, we get the Cyclopes, and we get the Hecatonchires here, right? The 100-handers with 100 hands and 50 heads, and so hideous that they must be bottled up back inside the womb, inside of the earth, Gaia. Now, Gaia, of course, doesn't take kindly to the fact that she went to all this trouble to have children, and then they got locked back up inside of her. And so she plots with the youngest of the Titans, Cronus, right, to get retribution on the father of the Hecatonchires, Uranus. And he comes in when Uranus is kind of drunk and ready to mate with Gaia, and he slices off the wiener of Uranus, and of course launches it majestically through the air, and it's flying all across the heavens and lands in the Mediterranean Sea, where of course we get Aphrodite, right? So she pops out of the sea from the froth, and other deities, giants and nymphs and stuff are created along the way. So a kind of wild story to start this thing off. I am going to go ahead. We got one more thing before we get into that. Yes, so the Titans aren't they rule for a while, but they don't end up being the kind of deities that we tend to think about most prominently when we think about Greek mythology, right? We think of the Olympians. And the way that comes about, right, is that the Titans fall into the same trap that their parents or their dad Uranus once did by, caging up the Hecatonchires once again, and then it's their children, right, the Olympians, who first are eaten by the Titans, and then we end up with Zeus basically leading the rebellion, getting Cronus to vomit up his brothers and sisters, and then they have this massive battle that we're looking at a depiction of here, the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympians, with the Olympians becoming the eventual victors. Okay, so now let me go ahead and turn this over to Julianne. Katie, I'll try to mess with it and see if I can get you on as a co-host there. If not, Julianne, take over. And then once you're done, Julianne, go ahead and pass it on to Darcy. And then once we go through that whole progression at the end of today, go ahead and throw it back to me. I'll come back on and give you some words of wisdom for the weekend. All right? So, Julianne, the stage is yours.
Okay, awesome. I don't know if Katie is able to unmute herself or if we have the power to unmute her. If not, it's fine. I can talk. I do like attention, so no problem for me. But so you have your final project coming up. Woo! So this is really an opportunity for you all to get creative and express the myths in a fun way that would be interesting to other people who like aren't classical scholars, and just like the general public, which I feel like is lucky for us. The myths kind of lend themselves to be interesting already. So we can kind of, oh, Kay, are you able to unmute yourself?
I am unmuted.
Perfect. Welcome. All right. So yes, now Katie and I can both talk. Okay. There are really a bunch of endless options that you can choose, but we do ask that you have some sort of a digital component, and we have more information on that here in a slide or two. But so the main thing for the project is that there is the digital component, the creative thing where you get to really let your creativity run wild and create what you want. But then we also want to see how you engaged with primary and secondary sources, and then talk about like a little conclusion about your project and what it was like to work with the sources and all of that.
All right, so the first thing that you guys are going to want to be aware of that's coming up is your research proposal. And you're going to get to do a rough draft, and we're going to grade that and hand it back to you, and then you can sort of go back over what you've done and make a couple corrections and also make it a little longer. The rough draft is going to be 500 to 1,000 words. Don't go over that too much because we do, have a lot of things to read. And part of this is that you can be concise in sort of explaining the sort of thing you want to do. The final draft can actually be up to 1,500 words. That's a typo there. But yeah, you're going to get some more details on these when the actual assignment pages go up on D2L, and you'll be able to read through these and get a little more nuance. But basically what it's going to include is the topic you want to investigate, the sources that you might be able to use for this. You're going to want 2 primary, which is like sources from the ancient world, and then 2 secondary sources, which are more modern. And we'll go more into detail on sources probably next week. And then you're also going to want to explain why your topic is important, why it matters to the modern world, and just sort of why other people should care about what you're writing about or what you're making a video about.
Yeah, so like we said, there is going to be a digital component. So here are some examples of digital things you could do. So some sort of documentary or video, or you can read what's there on the slide, but really just and it's not limited to what is here. If you have a different idea that you think would be fun and a fun way to get, again, the intended audience for this project is people who is just like the general public, people who might not have spent years studying classics, but will still be interested in the myths. So you really can do a bunch of options. So if there's something that you're really, really interested in or passionate about outside of class, like maybe you have a sort of artistic skill or something like that, definitely try and bring that into this. This is a great opportunity to engage a bunch of different interests in the study of mythology.
All right, so a lot of you are probably freaking out right now and wondering what sort of thing you're going to want to do for this, because really the options are endless, and I realize that's very vague, but you're going to want to focus on something that really interests you. So like if you're really into medicine, or you're really into food, or just art, architecture, you're going to want to hone in on that. If you're a huge fan of a particular video game that like draws in some of these myths, then do that, because it's going to make your project so much better if you're actually interested in the subject matter. But you also don't want to just pick something that's extremely broad. So if you wanted to do something with a TV show, you wouldn't just want to compare like every TV show and Greek myth, because you're going to have way too much content. There's no way you're going to be able to condense that down into like a 5-minute video. So you want to pick something that's really specific to address in that. And the example I have here, if you're interested in Xena Warrior Princess, which is probably a little too old for most of you, it's a show that's set in ancient Greece, but you might want to take a look at how the gods are represented in that, or how a particular myth is addressed. And you can do that with basically anything you want.
Yeah. And if you're still like, I don't know what to do, a great place to start would be just like brainstorm for a few minutes and write down things you like, the academic subjects that you're interested in that's not mythology, and then also make a list of just like other random hobbies and things that you like, and kind of see where you can have those intersect with mythology, because the really good products are going to be the things that you care about and you're passionate about and you actually want to spend time working on. And so if you can find a way to get your other interests to play into this project, then that'll make the project better. You'll hopefully enjoy it more, and hopefully it'll provide some guidance in choosing a topic. So here are the due dates. As you can see, the first one's not until October, and that's the draft. But these are all already up on D2L on the syllabus as well. So yeah. All right. Anything else we want to say, Katie, before we hand it over? Oh, did you already mute yourself?
No, I think that covers it until we go into more detail next week.
Yes, awesome. Okay, if you have any questions in the meantime, all of the TAs know about this. You can email any of us. I'm going to pass it over to Darcy.
Okay, so let's kind of dig into the Theogony a little bit more then. And I thought that we would start at a really good place to start, right at the beginning, the Invocation. So the Invocation is like the way to begin an epic. We see it in Homer, we see it in Virgil, we see it over and over again. So just for example, this is from the Iliad. Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles. So we've got Homer invoking the Muses. And then in Virgil, in the Aeneid, Virgil says, tell me the causes now, O Muse, how galled in her divine pride and how sore at heart from her old wound the queen of the gods compelled him. So Virgil's asking for the same thing, just this divine inspiration. So let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So basically, the Invocation is an appeal for inspiration from these poets, because the gods essentially have all the power. They kind of choose which humans they want to give the gifts to. The humans can't really do that themselves. And so Greece itself was a really agonistic society, and that means it was incredibly competitive. Just for example, so I think that I'm a fairly good knitter. But if we all were Greeks right now, as soon as we came into class, we would kind of have to all see who knits and who thinks they're good at it, and just have a big competition and just kind of settle, who really is the best knitter. Because really, that's a gift from the gods. So we have to kind of express that ability, right? To show the power of the gods. And that's kind of why hubris was such a big deal in the Greek world. Because, people that are expressing hubris, that's kind of just like this arrogant pride. And it's foolish, really, right? To claim that you're more powerful for the gods. So it seems like anytime you see hubris, be ready for a fall on that. So really, I mean, when we see an invocation, it's kind of just showing respect for the gods, right? Recognizing that the poets aren't the ones that have the power, but they have to invoke this, this capability from something sort of supernatural. So let's take a look at one of the readings real quick. So this is from line 23 to 25. It happened when I was tending flocks of sheep in a valley of Helicon, the holy mountain. And the very first thing that the goddesses said to me, those muses of Mount Olympus, those daughters of Zeus who hold the aegis, was the wording, shepherds camping in the fields, base objects of reproach, mere bellies, So that kind of shows us what Hesiod thinks of humans, right? Not a whole lot, I don't think. So yeah, I mean, Hesiod kind of, this sort of speaks also to some of Hesiod's other ideas. If you take a look at the Works and the Days, he kind of talks about the 5 stages of man. It starts with the Golden Age, when men were like really pretty awesome, really close to gods, but progressively they just get worse and worse and worse until, you know, you end up in Hesiod's day, when he thought that he was just living with these terrible, awful people. And so, it kind of just shows this vast separation between humans and the gods, right? So let's go ahead and move on. Oh, I'm sorry. One more reading. And they gave me a scepter, a branch of flourishing laurel. I have picked it, and it was a wonder to behold. They breathed into me a voice, a godlike one, so that I may make glory for things that will be and things that have been. And then they told me to sing how the blessed ones were generated, the ones that are forever, and that I should sing to them first and last. So here we see a couple of interesting things. First of all, he's talking about the laurel branch. So whenever you see a reference to a laurel tree, it's usually in reference to the god Apollo. And Apollo was kind of the god of reason and rationality, and often the Muses went hand in hand with the god Apollo. So that's something that we're seeing right here. But also, we look at the fact that the very last thing that they say is that sing about the Muses first and last, right? So that kind of gives us this other connection just between the mortals and the immortals, right? So when we want to have the first thing that we think about and the last thing that we think about be this connection between this poet and the gods, I think it's really saying something that, again, this is all coming from the gods down to humanity, this inspiration. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So another thing is that we see in the Invocation is that the Invocation kind of serves as just this connection between gods and mortals, right? So people can't approach the gods. The gods are way too powerful. And a good example of this is this woman, Semele. So she had a relationship with Zeus, but because they're Greeks and it's all a little weird, Zeus was always an eagle when he was having this relationship with her. And so Hera got involved, as she usually does in relationships that Zeus has. And she convinced Semele to have Zeus show himself in his true form, which of course no human can tolerate. So she was incinerated. So yeah, you can't have like a face-to-face relationship with the gods. That's just crazy, right? So the Muses can kind of help with that. The Muses directly influence humans through art, song, dance. So really, when we look at the Invocation, it's almost kind of an expression of the power of the gods and the capability of the gods, but just using humans as a medium, right? And then another interesting thing that we come across here in the Invocation is Calliope. Now, Calliope is the most important muse. So let's think about why that is real quick as we read another excerpt from the Invocation. So Hesiod says, whoever among sky-nourished kings is honored by these daughters of great Zeus and is beheld by them when he is born, for such a man they pour sweet dew upon his tongue, and from his mouth flow sweet words. The people, all of them, look towards him as he sorts out the divine laws by way of straight judgments, and he, speaking without stumbling and with his power of understanding, can even put an end to the great quarreling. It is for this reason that there are kings with good thinking, namely because when people are wronged in the assembly, these kings, can turn things right around for them quite easily, speaking in a deflecting way by using soft words. And when he, i.e. the just king, goes to a gathering, the people turn to him as if he were a god because of his gentle command of respect and he stands out among the assembled. Such is the sacred gift of the Muses for humankind. So what do you guys think? Why do you think Calliope is such an important muse to humans? So I think it kind of goes a lot with what we were talking about, or what Dr. Rob was saying before, with just the idea that you have this hierarchical society, right? And so it's really convenient to have this justification that the gods have given the kings this power, and they have almost divine authority to rule. And it's also probably pretty convenient for Hesiod too, because back in Hesiod's day, a lot of the poets kind of served as almost like a court singer. So they would compose these great ballads that were almost fawning to their patrons, these powerful kings, right? So it kind of helps Hesiod out at the same time it's helping the kings out, just expressing these ideas in this way. So yeah, that's just a few things to think about in terms of the invocation. So let's go ahead and see what Matt has to share about Pandora. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take the attendance quiz. So if you guys want to jump on D2L, we'll take a couple of minutes. Go to D2L, go to quizzes, and then attendance for September 4th. And today, Hercules is pink. So go ahead and select pink.
All right, I think that should have given everybody just enough time. So, Darcy talked to us about respecting the gods, honoring the Muses, and kind of getting that wisdom through the gods. Now let's talk about what happens when you don't respect the gods. So, many of us have heard the myth of Pandora. Pandora, meaning all gifted, is the first woman created by the gods for men. All the gods give her a gift, and they give her a little box, jar, depends on the depiction, to her that contains a lot of the evils of the world. Now, when Pandora is talked about, in Hollywood and comics and stuff today, from what I've got, it's mostly Pandora is seen as kind of, she doesn't quite know what she's doing or whatnot, not really the way she was devised in Hesiod and other myths. The gods, as we saw in our readings, made her to be evil, to kind of be smart and devious, and she is literally a curse on men and as the tribe of women. So we're going to look at a passage of Pandora, and I want you all to kind of look at some things we see in here, because when you're writing a paper, and you have to read these texts, sometimes it helps to pull out different things from the text and look kind of between the lines. So when you're here, look for like the origin of women, what this says about the origin of women in Greek society and their role in Greek society, and also look for the origin of societal conventions. Yeah, let's go to the next one. All right, so in Hesiod's Theogony, we see Pandora and kind of her creation. His other works in Days, goes into more of her unboxing, possibly the first unboxing video in the world. So yeah, all right. Pandora the Bane of Men. From her is the race of tender women. From her is a pernicious race. Tribes of women, a great source of hurt, dwell with mortal men. Helpmates, not in consuming poverty, but in surfeit. And, as when in close-roofed hive bees feed drones, shares in bad works, the former through the whole day till sunset are busy day by day, and make white combs, while the latter, remaining within the close-roofed hives, reap the labors of others for their own stomachs. Just as to mortal men, high thundering Zeus gave women as an evil, accomplices of painful toils. Another evil too did he provide instead of good. To wit, whosoever, shunning marriage and the ills that women work, declines to marry, has come to old age perniciousness. Through want of one to tend his final days, he lives not. It is true in lack of substance, but when he is dead, distant kindred divide his possessions, while to whomsoever, on the other hand, the lot of marriage shall have fallen, he has had a good wife, congenial to his heart, to him then forever ill contends with good to be with him. But whosoever finds the baneful breed lives with an incessant care to spirit and heart within his breast, and its irredeemable woe. Thus it is not possible to deceive or overreach the mind of Zeus, for neither did Prometheus, helpful son of Aeoptos, escape from beneath his severe wrath, but a great chain by necessity constrains him, very knowing though he is. Now, so let's take a look at some small sections. So pernicious, if you don't know, it means kind of like harming in a subtle or gradual way. Pandora and the tribe of women are meant to kind of harm men and kind of be a drain on men. A great source of hurt and helpmates not in consuming poverty, but in surfeit, consuming kind of excess. And this kind of goes along with the bee analogy that we see next. So I want everybody to message me in the group chat. Just what do you think this means? So what do you think this means about the role of women in Greek society? Let's see if we can get a few responses. Definitely a lower view, below men. Apparently to drain all the resources. Yeah, so there's a huge bias. Women are meant to be lower, submissive, and they're meant to kind of be like Zeus made them a curse. So we see that it's pretty easy to see that, but also a lot of these poets and a lot of the people who would be reading these poems or be hearing these poems are of a certain class. So we have in kind of Greek society, we have kind of the noble class and then kind of the lower class. Within those classes, there are strata themselves, but here we're seeing an upper class view. In the upper class, women are mainly going to be in the house, weaving, but a lot of it they're not doing as much. The men are doing some type of job or have their own money, while the lower class, you're going to see both men and women working, doing different things, different jobs. So here we're looking at an upper class view. How might this change if it's a lower class view? That's something good to look at when you're writing a paper or trying to close read a source. So then how do you think this, though, reinforces that societal role, or how does this go against it? Because here we see kind of it's a bad thing, right? It's not really helping the overall view. Gaia was not so much the first woman. This guy was first female deity, but in this sense, woman means a human female. There was a question about that. Yeah. Let's look at the second part. Zeus giving, you can say here, Zeus kind of gives women not only as just a curse and to drain resources, but he also makes them essential. You have to kind of marry. And from here, so what is this? I want to see some messages, what you think this means about the kind of the societal convention of marriage. That good thing, bad thing? What is it if we're forced to marry? What do people want to be doing? See some answers about that. Long-term investment. So yeah, there's a lot of things. I'm getting a lot of good answers here. So yeah, arranged marriages are a thing that's kind of like common. Marriages for wealth or status, marrying into a family, marrying out of a family. So again, we kind of see this as a class-based thing. Upper society is going to be marrying for privilege, for wealth, for political leverage, things like that. And also, we have to consider if women are just bad, we also have to consider how men viewed other men. So in Greece, as many of you know, was male homoeroticism was popular. We see in like stories like Plato's Symposium, the Iliad, lots of interactions between men in a romantic or a sexual way. But again, this just pulls a class-based thing because that would have been more for upper-class men seeking to be heroes, stuff like that. You know, they're trying to be like Plato, trying to be like Socrates, Alcibiades, or Achilles and Patroclus. So this, again, from a lower class, this might be different. One, you're not having to worry as much when it comes to marriages about political or social or wealth things, aspects to the marriage. And also, the upper class is going to be the ones who actually can pursue at least the Greek ideal of male homoeroticism. Kind of it's kind of like a master and apprentice thing, what's called a paideia and an araste. And there's like certain things you have to do and dramatic things by this or that. You don't get that in the lower classes. So definitely, if you're looking like for a final project or a paper, or even this class or another class, kind of look for these class-based things. So you can go to the next slide, though I mainly covered it. Yeah, so yeah, kind of what we talked about already. Just how does this, think about when you're doing close readings, how different texts speak to us about the society, about social class, about social conventions, things like that. All right, I will pass it on over to Colin.
Alrighty. We have done the invocation to the Muses. We've gone through the score and bane of men and women through Hesiod's Theogony, and now we are at the end, Tartarus. So if we remember from the Theogony, Tartarus is the third primordial deity created. Supposedly, according to Hesiod, he's actually deeper in the earth than Hades. So if you're driving on a really long highway, let's say you're going through East Texas, and then you find a little town and there's Hades, and you go like 10 hours more, and then you get to Tartarus. It's a really long way to get there. Tartarus is interesting because this is where the boundaries of the world meet, according to Hesiod, where you imagine you could have the roots of the earth and the sea coming together, congealing together. You have the night and the sun together, where when you have the dawn at one time, and then in the morning, and then the twilight at another. Additionally, it's where the rivers and then also what's known as ocean. So quick background here. The Greeks, although they lived in an island culture and surrounded by a bunch of water, Once you got past a certain amount of land, then they thought the world was encapsulated in a circle by a ring of water. And who knows what's beyond that. So there's a little bit of a question of whether Tartarus is actually for the land of the dead. We know that Hades has a great time in his gated community, bronze gates, very exclusive, having people come there. They have punishments. We could think of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill and then it's coming back down. He's got to do it all over again. But in Tartarus, you actually don't know if people are there. Because when you get up to, like, let's say someone having a punishment, what you really see and hear is just this dark, misty, creepy cloud. And you can hear things, but you don't actually see what's happening. For those who have practiced Judaism or know a little bit about it, the concept of Sheol is very similar to this, like a very dark, mysterious afterworld. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I want to draw your attention to the oath of the gods, and I want to read this a little quickly, and I want us to get to 3 questions for us at the end. All right, so let's put our listening ears on, and mind you, I want us to pay attention to the italicized words that all deal with water, because Tartarus, the word itself, actually deals with something like chilly, cold. Okay, so it's 775. There too dwells a goddess, odious to immortals, dread Styx, eldest daughter of backflowing Okeanos, and apart from the gods, she inhabits renowned dwellings vaulted by huge rocks, and round about on all sides they are strengthened to sky by silver columns, and whosoever of them that hold Olympian dwellings utters falsehood, then also Zeus is accustomed to send Iris to bring from afar in a golden ewer the great oath of the gods, the renowned water, cold as it is, which also runs down from a steep and lofty rock. Whosoever of immortals that occupy the top of snowy Olympus shall have offered of this as a libation and sworn over it a false oath, lies breathless until the completion of a year, nor ever comes near the repast, a meal, of nectar and ambrosia, but also lies breathless and speechless on a strewn couch. And for 9 years he is parted from the ever-living gods, nor ever does he mix with them in council, nor in feasts for 9 whole years, but in the 10th he mingles again in the assemblies of the gods immortal, who occupy Olympian dwellings. So in the chat, could you tell me what your initial response is to this? What's happening in this passage? What do we think the oath means? What is this passage talking about? You can either do that privately or to the group. All right, so one person said, it's like a set of rules. Yeah, a way to live life. An oath to life and death. Taking an oath is a very serious thing. If you do break the oath, you're going bye-bye for 9 years. Yeah, so there's rules of life and death, keeping honesty, holding people accountable. All these things that are so important. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. I have 3 questions for y'all. Okay, so as you read these, you can put your answers in. If you're going to respond, at least put like before 1, 2, or 3 right before it so that I know what you're talking about. Okay, so first question, why does Hesiod begin and end with realms of darkness? Remember, he began with chaos and now he's at Tartarus. Number 2, what does the natural imagery tell us about oath swearing? Remember, there's a lot of imagery about rocks, water, running water. There's the imagery of the water from Olympus all the way down to the river Styx in the underworld. And lastly, why would the gods swear to oaths under these conditions? So number 1, we have to depict the consequences of disobedience. Talking about how it's a life choice. So for number 1, someone's saying this is beginning to the end, and the beginning and the end of life. Oh, I like this from number 2. The natural imagery of mist water, long falls represents the permanent nature of the oath. I love it. Again, talking about the genesis of life and the end of birth. Someone was saying how the beginning of life is foggy and then the end of life is foggy and unknowable. For number 3, the gods set themselves up as an example, and this is how we're supposed to live life. The classic line of from womb to tomb. Number 2, for oath-taking is serious, and the process can also be enlightening. When you do take an oath, I don't think anyone wants to break their promises. Not good. You don't want to be a flake. Number 3, someone said, show the the Greek people that rules are placed on them. So there is definitely this idea of there are these cosmic rules that where if you swear an oath or if you have a promise, you must abide by it at all costs. Ooh, this is a really good one for number 1. We are all going to the same place in the end, so your integrity in life is extremely important. All right, I'm so happy with all these responses. 10 out of 10 would recommend. So thank you all so much for indulging in me, Darcy, and Matt. Seriously, this was great. All right, Dr. Stefan, do we want to kick it back to you?
All right, let's go ahead and get this over here, bring this over here. Hopefully you guys can see me once again. Guys, that was awesome. That was exactly what I was hoping for today. Really well done by all of you. And for the students out there, I hope this gives you a sense for kind of how Fridays will flow. If we can make this kind of work over the course of the semester, we're going to be in really, really good shape. Kind of part of it based on working towards the final project, part of it really digging in to the texts that we're focused on each week. Now, if as a student you're sitting there like, well, why are we talking about the texts after we've already written the responses, right? It would be really useful to talk about this before we wrote the responses. I can kind of feel you there, but look, my hope is I really, really, really want your own kind of original creative opinions in those responses again, right? They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be some right answer. I want your original thoughts supported by stuff from the text. That's why we're having these conversations afterwards, and so that you've already read them and you can engage intelligently with the questions that the TAs are asking. So look, excellent job today. Great second week of class. Don't worry about doing anything over the weekend. Unless you're an honor student, you should probably read through like the assignment or whatever. Maybe start thinking of like what you might want to do for your final project. Again, the world is your oyster here, right? Pick something you absolutely love. Come up with some sort of format that you think is going to be awesome. And then over the weeks, we will build towards making that really, really good. So go ahead and have a wonderful weekend. We will catch you back here on Monday. And until then, I'll see you guys later. All right?